History remembers the British Empire for its grandeur and power, yet for millions in India, the empire evokes a different narrative. It is a story etched in the dark hues of exploitation, suffering, and cultural dispossession. The British presence in India lasted for 2 centuries. During that time, a complex tapestry of interactions unfolded. However, these moments were overshadowed by a consistent pattern of exploitation and brutality. The British came to India as traders, seeking spices and textiles. They left as rulers, leaving behind a nation drained of its wealth, its people scarred by oppression, and its cultural heritage plundered. Understanding the true cost of British rule is essential, not to dwell in the past, but to learn from it. By confronting the uncomfortable realities of this history, we can better understand India's present and forge a more just future for its people. The legacy of colonialism continues to cast a long shadow, impacting India's economy, society, and psyche. The story of British colonialism in India begins not with the Crown, but with a corporation, the East India Company. Founded in 1600, the company initially arrived on Indian shores seeking trade. They wanted spices, silks, and the famed riches of the East. However, the lure of power proved too strong to resist. Over time, the East India Company, fueled by avarice and ambition, transformed from a trading venture into a ruthless colonial force. The pivotal moment in this transformation was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Robert Clive, through a mix of military strategy and outright bribery, secured a decisive victory against the Nawab of Bengal. This victory marked a turning point. The East India Company, once supplicants at the court of the Mughal emperor, now held the reins of power in Bengal, one of the wealthiest provinces in India. With control came exploitation. Heavy taxes were levied on the peasantry, pushing them into poverty. The Bengal Famine of 1770, a direct result of the company's rapaciousness, wiped out nearly a third of Bengal's population. The 19th century witnessed the consolidation of British rule in India. The East India Company, its rapacity unchecked, was finally dissolved in 1858, following the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. Control of India passed directly to the British Crown, ushering in the era of the British Raj. The transfer of power, however, did little to alleviate the suffering of the Indian people. One of the most egregious policies of this era was the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793. Enacted ostensibly to streamline land revenue collection, the act in reality created a new class of landlords loyal to the British. These landlords, often absentee and indifferent to the plight of their tenants, were given free rein to exploit the peasantry. The British also actively deindustrialized India. Indian textiles, once prized across the world, were driven out of the market by a combination of tariffs and unfair competition from British mills. The economic exploitation was staggering. British historian William Dalrymple has called the East India Company the most comprehensively rapacious corporation the world had ever seen. Economist Utsa Patnaik estimates that Britain drained a total of $45 trillion from India between 1765 and 1938. Section 4. The Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, a wound that never healed. The year 1919 witnessed one of the most horrific events in the annals of British rule in India, the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. On April 13th, in the holy city of Amritsar, a peaceful gathering of unarmed men, women and children protesting against the repressive Rowlatt Act found themselves trapped within the walled enclosure of Jallianwala Bagh. General Reginald Dyer, a British Army officer, arrived at the scene with a contingent of troops. Without warning, he ordered his men to open fire on the crowd, blocking the exits to prevent escape. Over 1,650 rounds were fired, transforming the enclosed garden into a bloodbath. Official British estimates put the death toll at 379, but Indian accounts claim over 1,000 people were killed. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre remains a deep and open wound in the memory of India, a chilling reminder of the human cost of British imperialism. Section 5. The Great Bengal Famine, a Man-Made Holocaust. The horrors of British rule in India were not confined to the battlefield or the policies of exploitation. The Great Bengal Famine of 1943 stands as a chilling testament to the devastating consequences of British indifference and wartime policies. Between 3 and 4 million Indians perished in this horrific famine, their deaths a direct result of the policies of the British government led by Winston Churchill. World War II raged across the globe, and India, as a British colony, was drawn into the conflict. The British war effort demanded vast resources, and India became a source of raw materials, soldiers, and most crucially, food. Rice, once a staple of the Bengali diet, was diverted to feed British troops and stockpiles, leaving the local population with critically low supplies. The famine of 1943 was not a natural disaster, it was a man-made catastrophe. Section 6. The Bitter Legacy, a Call for Reckoning. As the British Empire crumbled after World War II, India finally achieved independence in 1947. However, the legacy of 2 centuries of colonial rule could not be so easily erased. The British left behind a nation deeply scarred by economic exploitation, social divisions, and the psychological wounds of oppression. The economic impact of British rule continues to haunt India today. The systematic dismantling of Indian industries and the forced dependence on British goods created a cycle of poverty that persisted long after independence. The social fabric of India was also deeply fractured by British policies. The introduction of communal divisions, particularly between Hindus and Muslims, was a deliberate strategy employed by the British to maintain control. The psychological impact of colonialism is perhaps the most insidious and long-lasting legacy of British rule. The British Empire may be gone, but its shadow lingers on. Only by confronting the dark legacy of colonialism can we hope to build a future free from the ghosts of empire.